Hey, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Amanda.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Kathleen.
And this is the Federal Election Edition of Beyond a Ballot, powered by DoorDash. Hello and welcome to Beyond a Ballot for Thursday, April 3rd. I'm Hannah Thibodeau, and today the campaign trail is completely focused on Trump, tariffs, and tumbling markets. Let's start with Liberal leader Mark Carney, who is still officially off the hustings, speaking in his capacity as prime minister to announce 25% counter tariff on American-made autos. It's worth $8 billion, and that will be fed right back into the Canadian auto industry. Amanda Alvaro, tell us more about his day today.
Okay, so he spoke directly to Canadians. He had a number of things to say. He said that the unprecedented series of U.S. tariffs will rupture the global economy. He said that while further tariffs were not imposed on Canada, there were three different sets of unjustified and unwarranted, his words, U.S. tariffs relating to fentanyl, steel and aluminum imports, and on the auto industry. And he said that that poses a significant threat to Canadian workers and businesses. So what did he do? Well, he said the Liberals will, in his words, fight, protect, and build in the face of these unjust tariffs. He talked about imposing a 25% counter tariff on all vehicles imported from the U.S. that are not compliant with CUSMA. He talked about developing a framework for auto producers to avoid counter tariffs. He said that every single dollar raised from the tariffs will go directly to the auto workers and to the companies affected. He said that it builds on the $2 billion fund that has already been announced to build a new made in Canada auto sector and protect auto workers. And then he sort of concluded by talking about breaking down internal trade barriers, which of course has been a really important conversation. He met with the premiers, so this is one that the premiers have been having quite frequently, and talking about diversifying our markets with all of our reliable allies and like-minded countries.
Can you imagine if he follows through with that July 1st promise to break down interprovincial barriers? I'm skeptical, but I'm willing and hopeful that it can happen. Anyway, onward to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He seems to be switching gears, Rachel, now mentioning President Trump more in the past 2 days since this whole campaign began. His speaking tone is even different. And something else I noticed, his podium.
Yes.
He stripped it of the slogans, replaced it with that solitary maple leaf. Rachel Siegel, he is definitely trying to show that he's the best leader to take on Washington.
I love that you brought that up because obviously we've all noticed the shift in the visual every day. In fact, we put a picture of Mark Carney talking this morning and Pierre Poilievre talking this morning together in the Beyond a Ballot newsletter this week, just to show people how they are both standing at the same podium now. And we've talked about this so many times about looking prime ministerial. Pierre has shifted to the Trump tariffs because obviously that is the most important thing to be talking about this week. And so we've talked about how he wants to talk about domestic issues through the campaign. He has said Trump is super important to talk about as well. And that's what we're seeing today. He's in Kingston. He was talking about axing the GST on Canadian-made cars, so saving Canadian-made cars money in terms of production, talking about keeping Canadians working fund, a loan that would be given to try and keep Canadians working in these companies through the tariffs. But he also brought out his Trump tariff plan today and talked about three different parts. And we talked about yesterday how much conservatives love three things. One is the immediate response to tackling the dispute after the election, and three, the long-term plan to build an economic fortress for Canada. And so I don't have the time to jump into all three of those, but Pierre Poilievre today coming out and putting out his plan to tackle the Trump tariffs. And I think it's a strong one, and it's really on message with where Mark Carney is at. And I think he's done a great job this week of really not only talking about the lost Liberal decade and the affordability crisis, but also talking about his specific plan for the Trump tariffs and how he would go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump when he becomes prime minister.
And we are fortunate to have our Kathleen Monk back on the ground, back with us. Now, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is throwing it back to the 40s, but proposing a modern day wartime victory bonds as a way to fund Canada's side of the trade war. Talk about that, Kathleen.
Yeah, well, he's acknowledging, as all party leaders are, that we are in an economic trade war. And so he is hearkening back to the idea of a victory bond. So what a victory bond is the idea that Canadians could buy these bonds 5, 10-year terms that could be, taken off your paycheck or bought at a bank. They would achieve a certain rate of interest, pretty higher interest that you would normally get in your bank account. And all of that money would be funded. And first of all, any interest you'd make on it would be tax-free. And all of that money would be funded into infrastructure projects, into getting Canada building. So an interesting idea, but if I could just pivot for a bit, it's the ethos or the kind of the idea behind the victory bond about Canadians rallying together to rebuild our country and invest in our country, which is important there, because I think ultimately all three leaders have the same stance when it comes to Trump. There's not a lot of difference in the nuts and bolts when it comes to how we approach Trump. All leaders are approaching Trump. It's really a difference of tone and behavior, because we all want a resilient Canada. We all have talked about retaliatory tariffs. Maybe some parties disagree on whether everything should be on the table or not. Certainly Daniel Smith does not want energy exports to be on the table. But generally most party leaders are aligned. So where you're going to find the difference between them is who they're trying to protect and tonally how they're projecting themselves. We have seen, as Rachel said already on the podcast, Pierre really tried to take the fight to Trump this week. The question is if it's actually authentic, right? Like, we know that he was kind of called on the mat last week to kind of like do something more against Trump. And he certainly did in two of his scrums, both today and yesterday. He's been out there. And so, but the question is if he actually, if people can buy that he actually will take the fight all the way.
Okay, campaign call out time. Amanda, you're first.
Okay, well, my campaign call out originally was going to be trolls, and the chief troll today, who was former Reform leader Preston Manning.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote an op-ed, and his op-ed said that if Mark Carney becomes prime minister, that Western Canada will split from the rest of the country. But I'm going to do a little pivot as well, because
Okay.
I think that one of the things, but I'm going to make them link together. So Polyev was asked about this because, as you'll recall, Polyev was very active in his early days as part of that Reform Party under Preston Manning. And Preston Manning is sort of considered an elder statesman amongst the conservative circles. Polyev, when asked about this today, distanced himself immediately from Preston Manning and said, no, a conservative party wants only to talk about uniting the country. And listen, I get this chameleon approach of Polyev, this sudden change of tone, the way he dresses, the way he speaks, getting rid of the slogans and stopping his divisive language. But I get it because it's advantageous to his campaign. I grow very weary and very concerned, and I think other people do, because he spent 2 full years, being a totally different person. So who are we really voting for? And that's my campaign call out. I almost called him Preston Polyev. Pierre Polyev, who are you really?
Okay, Rachel, do you want to respond to that, or are you going to just do yours?
I had such nice ones, and now with Amanda, I'm going to respond.
I'm sorry.
You're pivoting too? Everybody's pivoting.
I want to give a couple of nice shout outs first. One is to Jagmeet Singh and these wartime bonds. When I was listening to this, it just brought back all these memories of like older relatives talking about how they supported Canada during the war. And I was like, that's kind of a nice policy. I liked that. The other one to Pierre Polyev, who continues to bring out thousands of people to his rallies, including last night, 4,200 in Kingston. He's tonight doing another one in Oshawa, and that is Cartown also. So we'll see how the auto workers show up for that. Yeah. In response to Amanda's shout out, I'm going to flip that to Mark Carney and say, yes, exactly. Who are we voting for? Because Canadians have no idea who Mark Carney is, namely because what are we on here? Day 11 of the campaign, 5 of which he's taken off to play play prime minister. And so do we know anything about Mark Carney other than the fact that he wants to fight Donald Trump on these tariffs and he wants to be the prime minister? Nope. He put out one housing plan. We haven't seen anything else from this campaign. And so I would leave you with that, listeners, today. Who is Mark Carney?
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah, well, I kind of feel like I should give my campaign call out to Rachel for the she just did on Amanda. But no, I've got a real one. A couple things. Well, I guess primarily, if you look at the course of the week, the campaign call out has to be for candidates and the Conservatives. I know we're talking about this coming up and we're going to have a whole thing on vetting and vetting candidates, but I mean, in the last 2 days, they've dropped 4 candidates. And really the question I have is they've been leading in the polls with this massive lead for 2 years, consistent, a huge spread, sometimes up to 25 points above the other parties, which really generally means they're able to attract the best and the brightest of the candidates, the star candidates. Everybody wants to run for you. So I'm just a bit flabbergasted, frankly, that they've had to cut so many candidates. But when you think about it strategically, they're cutting fast and they're cutting furious. Yes, to meet the deadline. But also I think they're trying to show the difference and decisiveness of that campaign team as in contrast to the Liberals who have taken longer to kind of cut or disavow themselves of their problematic candidates. And I want to just cross my fingers, knock on wood, and cross to the high heavens. Because right now, so far, New Democrats have not had to kick off any candidates. And it's my dear hope, having been through many campaigns and suffered many scars from having to drop or defend candidates, that we continue all the way to Election Day without having to drop any of our candidates.
And that is a wonderful transition to the end of the show, because tomorrow we are diving into that campaign chaos. Both the Liberals, as Kathleen is saying, and the Conservatives have had to cut candidates loose this week. So what's going wrong behind the scenes? Well, as you heard, Kathleen has been in this before. So have Amanda and Rachel. They know the playbook, they know the pressure, and they know the panic. Tune in when we will answer the question some campaigns have quietly faced. Do nude pictures on the internet still cost someone their candidacy? I'm not kidding. We are going to get the answer to that question. Tune in tomorrow.
Thank you for listening. New episodes come out daily, and you can find Beyond a Ballot on Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. A huge thank you to our title sponsor, DoorDash, and sponsors Equal Voice, Page, and Canada Powered by Women for making this election special possible. Speak to you tomorrow.